Hello and welcome to the DecisionWise podcast. My name's Charles Rogel. I'm a senior consultant here at DecisionWise. I'll be moderating this session today. Today we're joined by Beth Wilkins, one of our principal consultants here at DecisionWise.
Hello, everyone.
Beth is, like I mentioned, one of our consultants here. We want to highlight her background and the work that she's been doing, just to give you an opportunity to get to know her better and understand her expertise. So, Beth, we wanted to start off just understanding a little bit more about your background, education, and career. Where did all this begin for you?
It began at Novell many years ago. I was an HR generalist there.
Yeah.
And I loved the learning and development aspects of my role. I quickly decided I wanted to get more education in that space so I could add more value.
Yeah.
So I did a master's in instructional psychology and technology. And after that, I decided to venture out to the Bay Area, and I had an offer from Oracle. I was so excited to work for this large global tech company. And Liz Wiseman, who was the VP of Oracle University at the time, was the one that brought me in, and she's been a fabulous mentor to me.
And she wrote Multipliers, is that right?
Yes, yeah, she wrote Multipliers, and she used the techniques in that book on me.
Really?
Yeah, and they work. So, for example, I remember when I first started, I had just been there for a few months, and she threw me into this leadership series that she was facilitating. Here I was, fresh out of school. I had never been a leader, and I was teaching.
Had you done any leadership training before or anything like that?
No, I'd studied it, but I'd never done the training.
Okay.
And so I was really nervous to be co-facilitating this with her. But she believes in challenging people. So she threw me into the deep end on this.
Wow.
And, was very encouraging, but she was not going to let me off the hook. So I remember the first day I was deer in headlights. She looked over at me and she said, "Beth, are you okay?" She's like, deep breaths, And so it was great. It ended up being a good experience, but that was typical of her. I had several assignments like that in the next 7 years as I was an organizational effectiveness consultant there. And then I was put into some leadership roles there. I ended as the director of organization and talent development.
Wow.
I also spent some time at RBL, which is Dave Ulrich's consulting firm, which was also a fascinating experience. He taught me a lot as I partnered with him in the banking industry and pharmaceuticals industry. And then I also worked for a global nonprofit, and I was the director of organization and talent development there as well.
And so were you doing a lot of content design, leadership development, creation? What kind of projects were included, or do you want to talk about that a little bit later?
I can talk about that. So at RBL, I was in their leadership practice. So I was designing global leadership programs for some of their large Fortune 100 companies.
Excellent. And so how did this all turn into kind of a passion around employee engagement? Obviously, you're doing organization development, so I imagine that was kind of mixed in there. But when did employee engagement kind of come onto the scene, and how were you kind of incorporating that into the work that you were doing?
I remember the first time I realized how important employee engagement was. I was working with the executive vice president of services engineering at Oracle. His name's Mark Milani. And he was a very humble man, which was not the typical profile at Oracle. There are some really, really bright executives there that knew they were. And they thought they had all the answers. He was somebody that felt like the answers were in his people and that he had to engage them and their intelligence and productivity in order to be innovative and find the best solutions. So he brought me in and said, I want to design a global leadership program for my engineers. And we started talking about what it would look like. And he quickly realized that we had to involve them in meaningful, real work for them to engage. And so we started brainstorming the things that kept him up at night. He called them his gnarliest problems. And we said, all right, let's choose the influencers, the high potentials in your organization, and let's have them be the participants of this program and give them these gnarly real business problems to solve. Of course, we'll give them some frameworks to help them solve them effectively, but we're turning it over to them. And it was such a success. It was so neat to see how motivated they were. They saw that they were impacting things, that they were creating products that were better, that efficiency was better. And at the end, Mark Milani actually was able to capture all of this success in a presentation, and he went around to other Oracle executives and told them what had happened. And because they're very competitive, many of them decided they wanted to do something similar.
Wow.
And so what it turned into was a global executive leadership program for the whole organization.
Interesting. And it was very customized to the needs and very project specific, I guess, in terms of the work that you did.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was so neat to see how if a leader really cares about engaging people in the most meaningful things and takes the time to figure out how they can uniquely play a part in this, how much it makes a difference in the success.
So it really empowered these leaders. They really bought into it, really got them motivated. Interesting.
Yeah, and led to a lot of success for the company. So they would present their solutions to executives. And in that program that I did with Mark Milani, and then the executive program that we did later, many of those solutions were actually used by the executives, were implemented.
Oh, that's neat. So it wasn't just an exercise. It was an actual outcome.
Yep.
Wow, cool. So what else? What are some other experiences that helped influence your passion for this topic?
So when I was the director of organization and talent development at Oracle, I was asked to design a high potential program, and I got to go around to the universities who do organizational development and organizational behavior best.
Yep.
And one of those universities is the University of Michigan. And I got to work with Bob Quinn, who is such an amazing man and a mentor to me. I remember going into that experience thinking, oh yeah, I'm vetting them, seeing if they can help our executives. What happened for me is that Bob Quinn helped me tap into my purpose. He helped me engage further. And I saw how they worked with our participants to engage more too. So basically, they talk about positive organizational change.
Yeah.
And the only way you can really get to your potential as an individual or an organization is first to figure out what your purpose is, and then to figure out how you can move toward potential, right? So they did a lot of exercises to help people discover their values, their strengths, to help them kind of create a future state, a vision of their future state, and then move toward it. And I was at first concerned because Oracle is not at all a touchy-feely organization, and it seemed like it might come across that way. But when I saw the way they delivered it and the way that it impacted me as a non-touchy-feely person, I was a believer. I was so impacted by that personally, and I saw the way that it changed the engagement and productivity of our participants that I was led to do a dissertation in this area. So I'd been thinking about a PhD for years, but the dissertation had always really intimidated me.
You didn't really have a topic in mind or couldn't think of what you wanted to do?
Yeah, what would I want to write a book on?
Right.
What would I want to research for years? But I just loved this idea of helping facilitate the transformation of people's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. All of those things are important in engagement. And so that's really what I studied, was this, I called it transformative learning.
Yeah. So you changed from a very practical person to someone who is more in touch with thoughts, feelings, emotions in terms of how it ties into the work.
Yeah, well, the thoughts and feelings directly impact your behavior.
Yeah.
The way that you produce, so, and the way that you interact with other people. So it became clear to me that you had to start with mental models, and you had to really help people tap into like we said before, purpose and help them see how they were impacting the organization or the lives of others in the community or whatever the case might be.
So in light of this change and this passion you developed around transformation, how did that turn into additional work that you did both at the individual and organizational level?
Great question. I started getting really interested in individual coaching. Because I had experienced it myself and I had seen how it helped me really tap into my purpose, to examine some mental models in different ways and ultimately to sustainably change my behavior.
Yeah.
So I did 2 certifications. I did one with the Coaches Training Institute, or CTI, and became ICF certified after that. And I also went through Marshall Goldsmith's executive coaching program. He calls it stakeholder-centered coaching. And I really fell in love with this approach because not only are you working on yourself and trying to move forward, but you're engaging a learning network and you're optimizing the network. And so I started to discover that there were some techniques to manage perceptions and get really good feedback so that you could most likely change behavior and change behavior in a sustainable way. And then also I started thinking about how you could change as an organization. And one of the things that occurred to me is that you have some people that are your key influencers. And some of these people we know about. They're the people that have made it to the executive level because they're so great at influencing. But I started looking at the research around informal networks. So people like Wayne Baker, who's at the University of Michigan, introduced me to some of his research. And then Rob Cross is somebody I met. He's at the University of Virginia. And there's so much great research about how we often, as leaders, don't know who these informal influencers are.
Yeah.
So they started doing network mapping and showing that there are certain nodes in social networks. There are people that everyone goes to for information or mentoring or because they can get things done.
Sure.
And so I started thinking, if we could tap into these people, if we could coach these people or help engage them more fully, that's going to impact the whole organization to a great degree. So those are key levers.
And they're not necessarily managers in an organization, but they might have key roles and responsibilities or just be a good performer that people go to that have been there a while maybe. It just depends, I guess.
Right. Or have some information that's really needed by several people in the organization. Or be really great at selling an idea, right? So others want to follow them. So yeah, these are the people that are really already impacting your organization to a great degree. If you can, 1, figure out who those people are, and then 2, figure out how to really involve them in your organizational efforts, you're going to transform as an organization. So you'll see McKinsey, Deloitte, they've been putting out quite a bit of research in the last few years about this idea that when you're trying to go through a change initiative, and I think engaging your organization is certainly a change initiative, you need to figure out who your influencers are and involve them in that change process. Use them as sponsors of that change process.
And so with this, with these learnings, these takeaways, the experience that you've had, how are you applying that, I guess, to projects that you're working on now here at DecisionWise?
Well, one of the things I have been working on a lot is creating an assessment for org network analysis so that I help executives identify who these key influencers are, the ones in the informal network. And then I've also been thinking about creating transformational coaching packages. So I've thought through my dissertation research, what I learned from Marshall Goldsmith, what I learned from CTI, and I've been putting together packages that will make it most likely that a leader or a key influencer will change in a sustainable way and therefore influence the organization.
Okay. So a 2 for 1. You're coaching them for better performance, but also showing them how to be an influencer as
That's
well.
right.
Excellent. So anything else you want to share about your background, experience, things that you're working on here at DecisionWise?
One thing's coming to mind. I've had many clients want to measure their inclusion efforts, diversity and inclusion efforts. And one of the roles I had at my last job, so this is where I was the director of organization and talent development for a nonprofit, was as the head of diversity and inclusion. So I've done a lot of thinking about this and the business case for it. And I can see that, obviously you would want to engage your whole workforce, but especially when you get to the leadership level, and in particular the executive level, there's a strong business case for having diversity and for making sure everybody belongs in that setting. So, for example, McKinsey just did a study in 2017, and they showed that if you had females in your executive team, then you were 21% more likely to have above average profitability when you're looking at other companies who, are in kind of the top quartile.
Yeah.
And then if you consider different ethnicities, if you have an ethnic mix, you're 33% more likely to outperform your competitors. So there's a business case there, but then also you start to look at the leadership research, and if you have people up top that look like people in the organization, they identify more with them. It's the same with customers. If customers see that you have people up top that are making decisions about products, that are making decisions about the way that the organization interacts with the community, they're more likely to support you. And you as an executive team are more likely to meet their needs because you understand their perspectives better. So there's a strong business case for having everyone feel like they belong and really be engaged. And what I've seen with all of the clients I've worked with is that there are certain groups that trend lower on the engagement questions, and especially our number one driver of engagement. This is fresh off the press. I just got data today from our chief statistician that belonging, I feel like I belong here, is the number one driver of engagement.
Yeah.
And so what's been a little concerning to me is that we're seeing that women, especially when they reach the leadership level, are always trending lower in their belonging scores and a number of the other engagement drivers. And then you also see that Black or African Americans and Asians are often trending lower.
Interesting.
Yeah, so this is something that I want to look into more, and I think we at DecisionWise can really help people engage those groups that are often minorities in an organization but are very important for the success of the business.
Great. Well, Beth, thank you very much for sharing your background, the projects you're working on, and your insights, especially in terms of what really helps to transform organizations. And thanks, everyone, for joining our podcast today. And we welcome you to join us on our next session. Thanks, everyone.